I believe one thing for rock solid certain, and that is that every brand has an image, every image tells a story, and every story needs collaborators. Consequently, that's why I call myself DP Knudten of Collaborator Creative. But I'm here to talk about something very specific today that might be of interest to you. And it's a real big question, especially for anyone who has a brand, has a culture, and wants to know how one can help the other. And culture, chicken, brand, egg, which comes first? Do you have to have a culture to create a brand? Do you have to have a brand to create a culture? The answer is a surprising yes, one or the other. But I want to talk specifically about the differences between culture and brand. What are those differences? Well, culture is a sociological phenomenon. What does that mean? It's something that can be described and experienced. But a brand, on the other hand, is the disciplined execution and enforcement of codified foundational concepts. Those are fancy words, but I'm going to break them down to make them a whole lot more palatable. But let's just put it this way. How about this? Culture happens. Brand is planned. You wanted it simplified, Tracy Fuller of Wilderness Resorts? You got it. Tracy and I worked together quite a long time together. I just saw her for the first time in several years, so I'm going to give her a ration of hassle all during this conversation. So anyway, brand is planned. But here's the thing. When I say brand, when we say brand, when you're talking to each other and say brand, we don't always agree on what that means. Some people think brand is nothing more than graphic standards and the consistent use of logo, color, and type. Maybe there's a theme or a tagline that's associated with a campaign. That's branding, right? From my point of view, I think branding is everything from the way you answer your phones to your CEO's public behavior. Because as we've all seen, especially in the past year, a CEO's public behavior can shed billions of dollars of market capitalization overnight. And Travis Kalanick of Uber isn't the only one who's done that. A nonfiction brand, what I practice is what I call nonfiction branding. A nonfiction brand is not what you wear, it's who you are. And the very essence of nonfiction branding is this bumper sticker. Know who you are so you can be it. Not only that, know who you are so you can teach new employees to be it. That sounds a lot like culture, right? Knowing who you are and being it. I mean, culture is like a swimming pool you just swim in, right? Well, the thing is, you have control over the temperature of that swimming pool, the quality of that swimming pool, the rigorousness of the lifeguards that guard that swimming pool, and that's kind of what we're here to talk about today. Culture and brand, I look at it as two sides of the same coin. They don't exist without each other. We've all seen brands that promise a lot, but the culture fails to deliver. We've all seen cultures that are not effectively branded, so that, oh my God, if you've ever heard the terms best kept secret, oh, you're Milwaukee's best kept secret, you're Minneapolis's best kept secret, that means you have a culture, but you don't have a brand. Ideally, culture and brand are inseparable. I'm going to switch analogies from the coin thing to say that there are two ways, two roads to the same goal. And that is when you create a brand or have a culture, which comes first? In the first case study I want to take a look at, it's a brand first case study that I call getting organized from the get. You start by organizing. If you've dealt with anybody, if you're a franchisee or a franchisor, you've probably done this where you create the brand before you have any type of culture. Hey, I think we should start a barbecue brand. Great, what do we call it? Let's call it Smoky Jack's. Okay, let's have a logo. Let's create all this stuff before a single spade of dirt is turned. Tracy's nodding her head because you guys do it all the time at Wilderness Resorts.
We don't know what it's going to be until we have to sell it before it's even built.
Well, and you have to sell it to internal constituencies, ideally, to get them to green light it for it to go forward in potentially multiple properties. Great, so that's brand first. And brand first is okay because guess what? I have a great example for you. the United States of America. USA is a brand. Anyone who watched the Olympics and ever said, USA, USA, you are evangelizing the brand. Well, that brand, guess what, was organized with an architecture that was created by a certain group of gentlemen in Philadelphia and codified into print documents, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights, so that we have the brand documents that provide the foundation for the entire brand that is the United States of America. And it's so important that we have our own brand cops. These guys are the best marketing managers on the globe, because what they do is say, this is on brand, this is off brand. There is no gray. It's either yes or no. Can we do it? Can we not? Yes, no. Supreme Court, that's exactly what they do for the brand that is the United States of America. But here's the thing, even those guys need a code so they can be the cop to it. There has to be a code foundation, a written foundation for that brand so that you can deal with a whole lot of questions. An effective brand is the code foundation for everything. Any marketing manager in here, have you ever had a conversation with someone who maybe isn't heavily in the trenches with you in marketing, and you're showing them two concepts? You've got your lead dog that you show second because you don't want them, you do all the strategies, and then it comes down to someone who's not as well versed in what you do, who says, I don't like blue, let's go with the red. That's an opinion. Opinions are like, everyone has one, right? And they all stink. Branding is about getting rid of the opinion. It's about killing opinion so that we focus not on opinion, but on the brand. Is it right for the brand? That written brand that I showed you has its adjunct in the graphic world. Take a look at all these lovely little flags. Call them logos. These logos existed at the time those documents were written, and they represented the 13 colonies or part of a colony or a region within a part of a colony. All these flags were used as battle flags so that people knew what to rally around. And the United States of America did not exist until this. Take a look at this brand communication. 13 stripes, 13 stars. I wonder why they picked 13. 13's not a lucky number. It's representative of the constituent parts of the Union of the United States of America. Another thing, New York, Mammoth Colony. Pennsylvania, Mammoth Colony. Rhode Island, little tiny colony. Almost nothing. Is there a tiny star on there? Is there a tiny stripe on there? Or are they 13 equal stripes and 13 equal stars that are communicating that we are a union of equals? Now, let's face it, if you've got a more populated state, you have more Congress people, but you still only have 2 senators. There's a reason why they did that, and that's why that brand communication is so powerful. For the first time, this was the battle flag around which we all rallied against our enemies. Again, having a brand allows you to ask a very simple question: is it on brand? Good marketing managers will constantly fight back with Tracy and I was her creative director and copywriter, and she was my client. And so I had to do the dog and pony show using my amateur psychologist hat to say, oh, I know Tracy doesn't like this, so let's not even waste time on that. Oh, but she loves this, so let's throw this in there. But we want to guide her toward this, so this is how I'm going to do it. Ultimately, I would present those concepts, and the best thing that could come out of her mouth was, I like that because it's on brand, but I love this because it's on brand, and I like it. The very first sorter is that question, is it on brand, is it not on brand? To give you an example of that, when I was a young copywriter, I worked at McCann Erickson in Atlanta, Georgia, on a brand called Coca-Cola. And I would have to go with my concepts, my babies. I created these things. I think they're hilarious, or I think they're touching, or whatever, but they came from me, so they're my babies. And I walk into a room, and across the table from me were 5 MBAs, typically from Stanford or Harvard or Yale, who were there for one reason: to kill my ideas. They weren't there to green light them. They were there to kill them. Because the first role that they had was to make sure it was on brand. We can talk about, oh, I like the quality, or that's cool, I like that jingle, I like that song, or whatever. That didn't come before the first question was answered, was, is it on brand? Is it aligned with us? And more of my babies died on that table than got through all the way to publication or airing on TV or whatever else. At the time, I hated those guys, because they made my life miserable. I am proud to say we never had to go completely back to the drawing board, which was, they bought one of the concepts. But I do know other friends of mine who literally, they killed them all and said, go back and try again. Why? Not because I like blue or Coke is red, but because it's off-brand. Not just off-brand in terms of the color palette. Yes, Coke is very concerned about the use of red, especially in comparison to its deadly enemy, Pepsi, which is blue. We could not have blue in those ads. Why? What's the difference between Coke and Pepsi? They're both sweet, brown, fizzy water. Brand loyalty. I love to point this out to those people. I look around the room and do a little profiling on age and go, okay, critical mass of you understand the words New Coke. Remember New Coke? When Coke, if you recall the context of the New Coke debacle of the mid-'80s, Pepsi had a very effective TV campaign called the Pepsi Challenge. 2 cups of cola, you didn't know what the brand was, you're at a mall, someone comes up, they taste it, oh, I like A. Well, A is Pepsi. And by the way, Coca-Cola did the research too, and their research mirrored Pepsi's, which was, people prefer Pepsi. So, they decided to mess with Grandma. Grandma is Coca-Cola. Since 1886, Coca-Cola has been sold throughout America and, by extension, the globe. The thing, remember their old tagline, the real thing, Coke is the real thing, and they go back to that all the time. It's always Coca-Cola, or they always circle back to that main concept. That's because that's a core brand concept. We're the real thing. We don't change. Grandma. I call Coke Grandma because I love Grandma. She's a little acidic sometimes. She's not necessarily my first choice in every situation, but I love Grandma. When they came out with New Coke, they messed with Grandma. Guess what? When a brand is aligned, it's like this, everything in a line. New Coke is a 90-degree pivot that Coke did reactively because they were afraid of losing market share to Pepsi. And what did the marketplace do? You don't mess with Grandma. You don't mess with the brand that I've known as a kid all the way up to my adulthood. You don't change the flavor. If you need to come out with a different brand, I'm okay with that. But you don't mess with your core brand. When was the last time you saw New Coke in a store? When is the last time you possibly tasted one? Coke's doing a lot of things now, reacting to the marketplace based on obesity crisis and things like that, but they don't mess with their flagship brand. Why? To maintain that alignment. Brands, the marketplace will force your brand to align. If you go off, it'll force you back. They're like the Supreme Court of you. They'll force you back in alignment if you have a brand that they understand. And that's the big question. Do they have a brand that they understand? Or do you have a brand that they understand? Is it on brand? Is an objective measure, not a subjective judgment. The ads that I presented at Coke, they didn't fly because they were objectively off-brand. Shame on me for coming in with stuff that was off-brand. So that's branding first, which if you're a franchisee or a franchisor, you're probably very familiar with that. You buy a franchisee because you've got the brand. But what if you're a smaller organization that's a family-owned, or maybe multi-generational family-owned? There's another way to create that brand, and I like to call that organically grown. I want to take you a little bit quite a ways outside the world of food service to think about these guys, and that's Marion Lloyd Anderson. In 1936, Marion Lloyd Anderson needed an ice axe. What's an ice axe? That, in his left hand, is an ice axe. It's an absolutely critical part of climbing equipment if you're going to enjoy the mountains or glaciers or anything else. In this case, out near Seattle, where these guys are from, the Cascade Mountains. Well, in America, we don't have this, at the time, we did not have this deep, rich history in mountaineering. Everything was created in Europe by people who would take people into the Alps of the Swiss Alps, the Italian Alps, etc. And so they needed this ice axe. There was no American manufacturer of it. They were able to find one from a distributor in Seattle for $12 in 1936. $12 happened to be a full day's pay for Lloyd Anderson, who was a high-level engineer for the city of Seattle. He was making some serious coin, and that ice axe that they got from Japan that was not well made cost him a full day's pay. They later found out they could get the real thing from Austria for $3.50 shipped to Seattle. So they bought one for themselves, and then they had some friends who were also friends who loved the Cascade Mountains and getting out into the out of doors. So they bought them some too. Well, in 1938, a co-op was born. Now, some of you might be able to read up at the very top, Recreational Equipment Incorporated, REI. 1938, they incorporated with these written words. Intent of the founders of this organization was to secure sufficient membership to make group buying possible, to distribute the goods with as little overheads expense as possible, using membership cooperation with the work as much as possible, to gradually build up a reserve of purchasing stock, not actual material, equipment and stuff like that, not equities, to have a membership fee of $1 so that everyone interested could be financially able to join. These are the words of Recreational Equipment Incorporated, 1938. Recognize that? Or a variation of it? I love this picture not only because Mr. Dopey with the long johns and the bad hair day is in it, but it's got the REI logo on the tent, and that's not just some dopey guy in long johns. That was their first employee, a guy named Jim Whitaker, in 1955. So keep in mind, they started the co-op in 1938. In 1955, they finally hire an employee, which meant from 1938 to 55, there were weekends where, if you were a member, you were coming in to sort equipment and do inventory, and maybe you have to work a shift in the store or whatever. That's okay. Everybody who was a member of REI was an active outdoor enthusiast. They were happy to do it. 1955, however, they hire this guy, Jim Whitaker. Interesting thing, he's not a $5 an hour high school student. He happens to be the first American to summit Mount Everest in 1963. Their first employee was the biggest mountain legend in American mountaineering, and he kind of stuck around a while. He retired as CEO and president of REI in 1979. This guy is the living avatar of what REI is all about when it comes to enabling people to access the outdoors safely and successfully and satisfactorily. So much so, REI is a character in Cheryl Strayed's book. This wasn't just a fluke. That was 2014, Wild, major motion picture, major Hollywood star, and they just told you the features and benefits, one of the key features and benefits of REI. That's not by accident. happened again in the very next year. How much do you think it would cost you to get your brand in the same frame with Robert Redford? I don't think they paid a cent for that, because Bill Bryson, who wrote the book A Walk in the Woods, had REI as a character within his book. Wow, that's brand alignment. You walk your walk, you talk your talk, you talk and you walk. Amazing. That was organic. They hire Jim Whitaker, they do all this stuff. And then they got really serious in a big way about brand level communication. This is Jerry Stritsky, the CEO of REI. Well, he introduces himself, so let's roll it.
I'm Jerry Stritsky, the CEO of REI. This Black Friday, we're closing all 143 of our stores, and we're paying our employees to get outside, because we believe a life lived outside is a life well lived. We'd rather be in the mountains than in the aisles. Join us on November 27th at Opting Outside. Thanks.
That came out in 2015. It was all over all the major news channels, morning shows, everything. The outside campaign, hashtag opt outside. Everyone said, what a great gimmick, what a PR stunt. I love, they can't afford to do this. This was last year. They did it again. And they do it, I believe it's part of their core DNA now. It's part of their brand DNA to shut down all their physical brick and mortar stores on Black Friday, the biggest shopping retail day of the year. That says a lot about their brand. And it creates a real brand loyalty in someone like me. I've been a member of REI since I was in 7th grade, which was right after the Jurassic and going into the Triassic periods. My membership number is 527028. I had it memorized before I had my social security number memorized. If you use that number at REI, please do, because I'll get a dividend at the end of the year because I'm a member. I love this brand because of this. But Opt Outside is a big part of the REI brand. But take a look at this. This is their logo pre-2015. This is their new logo, which is actually their old logo. And they went back to one very important addition or remembrance, which is co-op. Now, the days of me having to go, I never had to go in and sort carabiners into boxes or stuff like that. But as a member, there are some privileges that you should know about this brand. And there is a cooperative spirit in this brand that you don't get from Dick's Sporting Goods. I walk in with a problem, and I know I'm going to talk to a salesperson who's not on commission, who's going to help solve my problem. I've taken a 5-year-old backpack in with a broken zipper, and they looked at it and said, okay, go pick out another one. If there's a price difference, we'll ask you to pay the price difference. And not the price of the prorated backpack, but the original list price. That one costs $20 more. We're going to ask you to pay $20. Know who you are so you can be it. I posit that REI knows who they are so much that they live it. In 1936, Lloyd and Mary needed an ice axe. Go to any of their retail stores, try to open that exterior door. What are you going to grab to open that door? An ice axe by the same company that made the original, that is still in business. It's a reminder to every employee who walks in the door, this is what we stand for. This piece of equipment, if you don't have it, you could die. With it, you can survive. I mean, it's an existential thing, so it's a constant reminder to those employees of who REI is. But, there's always a but, and typically it's a big but. The CEO of REI went on Reddit and said to ask him anything. Lots of disgruntled employees obliged. AMA, ask me anything, I think should stand for annihilate my posterior, because every CEO who goes on just lines himself up for the snipers. So the question is, If you're a CEO, should you not do a Reddit AMA? Are you kidding? Yeah, you should. But you better arm yourself for counter sniping. In this case, they had about 4,000, 5,000 questions and comments from people. Fully 10% of them, 450 or so, were from disgruntled employees who said things like this. I've been an associate of REI for 10 years. I've always scored at the very top in terms of customer service and satisfaction. I am now losing shifts. This will sound familiar to anyone who's in operations. I am now losing shifts because the only metric at which I am not at the top is selling memberships. You know that old management saying, what's measured is managed? REI started to measure the wrong thing. Now, yes, they want to sell memberships. They're valuable to people. But that's the story you should be telling is, why is it valuable to you? What are the features and benefits that make this a no-brainer for you? Not the, I have to sell 10 per shift. You're number 9, I got to hard sell you. To his credit, Jerry Stritsky said, about the Reddit thread specifically, this is a completely legitimate conversation. How we invite people to join the co-op and how we measure employee performance. It's an issue we're currently focused on, and I plan to dig more deeply. We will have a collective conversation about this. This will include conversations in our stores. If I'm not happy with what we find, we'll make a change. Bottom line, though, an open and transparent conversation is something CEOs should not be afraid of. I, for one, welcome it. He knows who REI is, and he's trying to be it. No brand is perfect. But a culture brand never stops trying, including this one. In order to form a more perfect union. I love those words because it doesn't say in order to form a perfect union. It recognizes the fact that perfection is humanly not attainable, but the striving toward it is what makes all the difference. Guess what? A culture brand is a two-way promise. It's not just what you hold your employees to, it's what they get to hold you to, too. A culture brand is actually owned by the equity participants, the owners, the employees and associates, but let's not forget that one of the biggest owners who have the ability to shut your doors overnight, your customers. You may own the logo, they are part owners of your brand. Lose sight of that and you can damage and even lose your brand overnight. Just talk to these guys. When do you expect to see Kevin Spacey in a movie? 10 years from now? Never? When do you expect to see Harvey Weinstein in jail? About 10 minutes? And Paula Deen, poor Paula Deen. What's all this got to do with food service? Ask Ian. Ian's Pizza, I'm currently working with them on their brand because they face a challenge that I wish on everybody who owns a restaurant. They were founded in 2001. They've been alive for 16 years. They've got culture for days. But that culture is based on their Madison, Wisconsin State Street store location. They now have stores in Milwaukee, Seattle, and Denver. The good news is the seed of the Madison culture is firmly planted in the soils of those cities because the general managers or the owners and partners of those cities were former Madison employees. However, these guys who are now in their own place, they're starting to agitate about, we're not Madison, man. We're a little bit different in Denver. We're a little bit different in Seattle. And the question for the brand is, okay, we get that. That's cool. Because what's made Ian such a fantastic brand for Madison has been, it's Madison. You go there at 1:30 in the morning, and it's nothing but drunk UW Badger kids. But you go at noon during the day, and it's full of moms with strollers who bring their toddlers in because my kid won't eat anything, but they'll eat the mac and cheese pizza. So the question for Ian's is, what's the recipe? What's the ratio? What's the balance between that which is local and that which is branded? How can we scale yet sustain our culture? The smart answer: codify Ian's culture brand. And that's what we're actually doing right now. Building a culture brand, how can you start? I want to give you something you can start thinking about today. And that is, what's your key three? What are the key three pillars of your brand? And I think of the key three as the three foundational concepts that concisely and consistently define and communicate your brand. When I worked on Coca-Cola, I can tell you what they were. And this was 20 years ago. They've changed things. They have not three, which is easy to remember. They now have four. But the three I had to deal with were three words: authenticity, refreshment, and sociability. Every ad had to project authenticity, refreshment, and sociability. Sociability is you don't drink by yourself, you drink with other people. Refreshment, it's that ah. And authenticity, remember, you don't mess with grandma. It's always the real thing. That's what they judged my ads on. I applaud them for doing that. So now I teach people, such as yourself and myself, that it's important to have those key three concepts, because if you're trying to be everything to everybody, you're nothing to no one. If you don't have fans who hate you, you don't have fans who love you. The idea is figure out what it is that make fans love you. What's the key three of the United States of America? This is my take. It's not officially codified in any graphic standards manual or brand manual, but it's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Everybody in this room can look at this and say, yep. So can anyone around the globe. When we're at our best, this is exactly what this country is about. REI, shared values, not share value. Purpose above profits. Advocacy for the outdoors and the people who play there. Did I make these things up? No, I pulled them from their website. They published them for everyone to see. And by the way, their employees felt free to give Jerry Stritsky the ration of crap that he got because, dude, we're not doing this. A lot of companies would fire the people who say, dude, we're not doing this. Good, high-performing companies embrace the people who are saying, dude, we're not doing this. Ian's, I could tell you theirs, but you're in food service. I'd have to kill y'all. Because your culture brand, when it's done right, becomes a competitive advantage. Ian's makes, say it with me, P-I-Z-Z-A, pizza. Pizza is a commodity. It's as bad as a frozen thing you pull out with a freezer burn on your bottom shelf of your freezer and you slap in going, I'm just hungry, let's eat this thing. To it's the most transcendent combination, like getting a margarita pizza from Italy, from the place that created the original margarita pizza. That's a huge spectrum. Where are you fitting on that spectrum as a pizza place? What's going to make you different than somebody else? I will tell you this, and I promised the brand people at Ian's I wouldn't talk too much about them specifically, but I will say when I did the conversations with all the constituents that I queried for the brand process, I asked them, what makes Ian's unique? And a lot of people said mac and cheese pizza. That was true at the time because they were the originators of the first quality slice of mac and cheese pizza. Guess what? CC's Pizza now owns it because they do national advertising on TV showing mac and cheese pizza. You can't compete with that. If you're the originator of it, yeah, well, too bad, they just steamrolled you. So you can't be just mac and cheese pizza. What are you? And that's what we're codifying right now so that everybody, so that they can scale. They can go to Nashville, they can go to Atlanta, they can go to Austin, Texas, and they can still be Ian's. And if you, any of you who've been in or around the Madison shops, if you go to one of these cities, you might say, hey, you got one? Let's go there. Have you ever had their mac and cheese pizza? Oh yeah, you gotta try it. And this brand level stuff goes all the way down to menu. Because if you're in Denver, Denver has a really healthy population. They want vegan tennis shoes, for crying out loud. What of your menu that plays in the Midwest, where everything's deep fried and coated with breadcrumbs, can you import over there or make sure it has to be on the menu? And what do you allow them to play with? What's that ratio? Is it 50-50? 50, here's your core menu and you can play with the other 50? Is it 70-30? Is it 80-20? That's a brand level decision. If you haven't had that conversation, you need to. Because there needs to be a certain level of flexibility to meet the needs of the people. Coke learned that a long time ago. Fanta, you know the brand Fanta? Go to India, grab a Fanta. Think you're gonna get orange drink or maybe a grape? No, you're gonna get tamarind. What's tamarind even taste like? I don't know, I've never had it. But they localize the Fanta to the tastes of the location they're in. But at any rate, Ian's 16 years in existence, started as a culture, is now going to become a brand for obvious beneficial reasons. I like to end things off by saying every brand has a defined key 3, including me, and I'm collaborative, I'm creative, shh, Tracy. But the last one is I'm provocative. Hopefully I've provoked some thoughts in your mind. My technique is this, which is to embrace you and say, oh, tweak on the cheek, what a great idea, poke in the eye, have you thought about this? And what I like to say, especially to clients, is if your creative partners have not challenged you like that on a regular basis, they're not doing their jobs. You may not like to be that challenged, but that's what keeps you sharp. And ideally, it's what keeps you on brand. I know my key 3. Do you know yours? I want to help you out. If you're interested, I've got a worksheet that I can get to you. And let's start with you, the foundation of your nonfiction brand. I ask us several questions that help guide you toward the idea of that key 3. And you can get that by texting this, and I'll throw this slide back up at the very end. You can text Collab to this number. It'll ask you for your email address. By doing so, I'm going to put you on my email list. Warning, I send out stuff maybe once every 3 months. But you'll at least have access to this and some other workshop stuff that I have. I always like to ask if you've got a group or a speaking gig, let's talk, because I love getting in front of people about things like branding, culture, and things like that. If you have a group in mind, let's talk as well. I have to mention this because I'm so proud of it. Spencer X. Smith, who's a social media expert, and myself put out this book called RTOMA. RTOMA is an acronym that stands for Return on Top of Mind Awareness, which is the answer to the question, why should I do social media? And the answer is because it gives you better return on top of mind awareness than anything in the history of the world, and it's free. There's also a podcast associated with it. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. It's called RTOMA. Just search RTOMA. And then again, this is me, where you can text. And I would love to connect with you online via social media or whatever else. I am DP Knudten, and this is what I do. I'd love to hear any questions or talk to you more. Thank you so much for having me today. Thank you to the Midwest Foodservice Expo and Amy Nitschke and everybody else for being such wonderful hosts. Thank you.